Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Careers in Finance webinar. My name's Darren Howard. I'm a 1983 boy and currently work as a financial advisor. I have our financial advisory firm, Merit Planning East, where we specialise mainly in strategies for self-managed super fund members and trustees. Joining us today, we've got three former great Sydney High boys. A big thanks firstly to Shuming Wang. He's joining us from San Francisco. It's just turned midnight there, so hopefully we can keep you awake there, Shuming. And a great year, school captain in 2013, and another fantastic year because the Roosters won the premiership that year. Also from the mighty 1983 year, David Scribner. Good on you, Scribbo. Thanks for joining us. And also, last but not least, Paul Coford, and coincidentally, Roosters won the premiership in 1974, Paul's final year as well. And Paul is actually one of the unique Sydney High old boys, playing in two of only five first 15 Sydney High rugby sides that won the GPS premiership. And remarkably, the first year he played, 1972, he was in year 10. So thanks and thanks to all the boys and parents and whoever else might be joining us. There's a question Q&A icon down the bottom of the screen. Please ask any questions as we go along, and we'll monitor that as we go. Firstly, guys, maybe start with you, Shuming. If you could give us a bit of a rundown on your current role, where you're at, and what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. So, hey everyone. Like Darren mentioned, my name's Shuming. Graduated Sydney High in 2013, and then left to go to college in America. So did my undergraduate degree at UCLA, and have stayed here ever since. After graduating UCLA, did a stint at JP Morgan, where I was involved in the banking team, focused on raising debt for corporates in America. And I've recently transitioned into a new role where I'm more on the investing side. So investing debt into companies, whether they be public or private, mainly in the middle market here in the US. And that's, think of it like very similar to if you were a bank and just lending money to corporations, but only here you're doing it on the investing side for, in this case, a private firm. And so that is day to day very similar, I think, in terms of the skill set of my previous role, where you're doing a lot of corporate finance, looking at balance sheets, looking at financial statements, interacting with company management, and kind of developing a view or a conviction on whether you want to be investing in this company.
Right. Thanks, Jimmy. Dave, if you give us a bit of a rundown on your current role. You're on mute, Dave, I think. Or maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Thanks very much. You've been on mute is probably the most stated statement in the last 18 months. So I thank you. Look, just a little bit of background. I was the class of 83, the centenary year. Left that and went to the University of New South Wales, I think with 30 other Sydney High boys. So for those who are going to New South. Bachelor of Commerce with a major in marketing. Lucky enough to be hired as a graduate into Nestle, which is a great firm, great international firm. So I was able to work internationally with them. And then I found myself in the telco industry, rising to the position of CEO of Virgin Mobile Australia. And now what's been a passion for mine is customer experience. I'm a global CX advisor for SAP. So that's what I'm doing there, Darren.
Great, thanks, thanks, Dave. And Paul, yeah, bit of a rundown on your current role.
Well, you're lucky my camera's not working, because when you leave in 1974, you're a lot older than everyone else on the screen. But I left after 74. I went to the University of New South Wales and did mathematics. At the same time, I was sort of pursuing a professional sports career, which ended in probably failure from my perspective. So I found a job by accident at the GIO. And with that, GIO and Mr. Keating, of course, at some stage early in the mid-80s, deregulated the dollar and brought in massive compulsory superannuation. So I joined the financial planning ranks at GIO, and the rest is history, because that is, like I would say to a lot of you, that the careers you're going to pursue haven't been invented yet. And that's hard to come to terms with when you're in year 12. A lot of things I'd say is that never knock back an opportunity, because you don't know where it's going to lead to. And financial planning for myself has been a very successful path. I currently work for the Suncorp Group. I'm at the twilight of my career, but I look after the world's biggest broker in Marsh & McLellan, and in terms of strategy and where they position themselves, and they're also Suncorp's biggest customer at the moment. So it's a completely diverse role than what I was thinking of what I wanted to do when I was sitting in 1974 in year 12 at High.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And I suppose might start with you with this question, Dave, and then for each of the others. When you're in year 12 or even year 11, were you tossing up amongst a couple of different degrees? Did you have a really firm understanding of I suppose, which one you wanted to pursue? And now that you've finished that, have you gone on to do some more, I suppose, post tertiary studies, and have you got anything else in sort of on the horizon that you want to pursue in terms of further study?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question, Darren. I think it feels like society's changed a little bit more. There's a lot more information, so hopefully the boys are doing the work that they need to do about studying about what they want to do. My thing that I would say for me, and I think for a lot of my colleagues back in those days, is that we had a couple of ideas about a few different sort of things, but it was more about getting a degree and then probably figuring out where you were going to go. And I thought that Bachelor of Commerce at New South Wales was a really good basis for me. So I sort of made a beeline to get the high school certificate mark to get that, and then get in there and then work it out. I didn't really, and I was thinking about finance actually, but thought quite liked the look of marketing on a couple of different levels, and what it meant, and particularly around customer behaviour, and that sort of set me up for the rest of my career. But I would say that it wasn't a direct route. It was a route that you went through a couple of different turns, and I think that's the exciting bit. It's learning. I think if you try to set out your career and join the dots now, very difficult. You only get to join the dots at the end of your career, and I think that's an important part, and it's enjoying that journey.
Great, thanks for that. And Paul, was it mathematics straight up for you, or were you tossing up?
Yeah, it was David's spot on about the learning. I actually went to the University of New South Wales really because it fitted in with what my aspirations were in sport, and that was either to be a professional league player or a Wallaby or whatever. Both those things didn't come to fruition, although I did play for the Roosters for a while. But I think education, as David said, is ongoing. Since those days, I went and did a degree in financial planning because, as I said, that's the world I was in. And I also did an MBA. I think education's a continual process. Also, I actually think the world's moving so fast that if you don't do some form of formal education, you just get left behind. And it's like, I like working like I do today with young people because it keeps you young and keeps you in the world they're in. If you think about the world we're in today with COVID and all the other permutations, if you hadn't kept up to date with some sort of things, even the mechanics of what we're using today in terms of communication, you'd be lost. So, David, I agree 100% that you've got to continue your formal education throughout your working career.
And yeah, I suppose, assuming yourself, have you obviously we're tossing up with a few different degrees in year 11 and 12, and subsequent to that, anything else on the horizon?
Yeah, definitely. I was always thinking about, whether I wanted to, stay in Australia for my tertiary degree, or move internationally. And for me, it was always finance was something of interest since growing up, just because both of my parents are actually professors in finance at UTS and one at UNSW. From an early age, I had the opportunity to be, exposed to those kinds of discussions at home, and they've always, think of that as a career option. And then I actually did a semester at UNSW before moving overseas, and the overseas kind of path was always driven by, I guess, my parents. They were got their education overseas as well, and they've I guess really thought that that would be a good opportunity for me, and just to see something new and explore something different. In my year at Sydney High, I think there were 2 people that went overseas. One of my classmates for basketball, and then me. And so I think going overseas was something always that I had in the back of my mind, and I was able to get into UCLA, which is really beneficial.
We've got a question here. What are the advices to students that don't have any idea what they might want to do at this point in time? So I suppose, yeah, maybe assuming, just following on from that, if did you have any sort of, at any point where you were stuck for an idea, or what would you suggest in those circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as much as my parents, kind of encouraged me to pursue, one particular field, it was always like, do what you want and what you have an interest in. And, for me, I interpreted that as, pursue the most basic and all-encompassing degree there was, which would allow you to shift and move or pivot if possible. And for me, going into college, that was like a commerce liberal studies or a commerce arts degree in Australia, and in America it was a liberal arts degree. So when I got into school, like, you can go in undeclared, which is basically you don't have a major, you just take like a lot of general education classes to kind of see what you like and see what you don't like. And I think that was really helpful for that. And so my advice would just be, take the most basic or most foundational degree offered, and see if, take the science classes and the history classes and the arts classes, and then go from there.
Yeah, you've got another question around that, Chiming, but I might just quickly touch for Paul and David. Maybe Paul first, and then David.
I might, this Darren and everyone else, I didn't do this because it wasn't a popular thing at this stage, but my son left, he didn't go to Sydney High, but he left school and went to Ireland for a year, for a gap year. Now, he didn't just have a holiday, he worked in a school in Ireland for a year, and it gave him a chance just to think about what he wanted to do. He was young, and I would think a gap year, at least with some purpose, whether it's to work, not just to travel around Europe on your parents' money, but somewhere where you work, and you'll be amazed how in that year, how many things come across your lap that help you make a decision on which way you want to go. David?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think you're spot on. So it's about building foundations. So as I mentioned, I got into mobile phones. Now, mobile phones didn't exist when I left school, but that was the big thing part of my life. There'll be other things that we will be looking at, or autonomous vehicles, whatever it may be, that we haven't even thought about yet. So getting great foundations, whether it's been doing a gap year, maybe getting stuck into a business degree at uni without going, okay, I've got a specified path. I think that's going to be the founding bit that move forward. I mean, there's been a lot of studies about the numbers of different careers people have depending on their generation, and I think this Generation Z is going to be, way into the double digits as opposed to us, which were sort of into the single digits about different careers that we're doing. So, get the basics right, and then move forward, and that'll give you the foundation.
Thanks, David. Now, you've had a specific question come through here, Shuming. Given your experiences of both at Australian universities and now in the US, would you, where possible, would you say it's a fantastic thing to do if you can do it? Have a study in the United States.
Absolutely. I think, any time you have the opportunity, it doesn't have to be the United States. I would recommend, anywhere internationally, from Sydney, to go do that. I think when I left, it was definitely on the, I guess, earlier side, in that, straight after high school, I was still, very young, and it was definitely a bit of a learning experience for me. In the first year, it's probably tough getting settled into a new environment, a completely new city. But I think it's definitely rewarding, and I wouldn't trade that experience for a thing. And speaking to a lot of some of my Australian friends out here now have moved in their professional careers. They really wish they had the experience of, or had the opportunity to move earlier as well. So I definitely encourage anyone who's looking to move for an undergraduate degree to do that. But if the opportunity is not there in an undergraduate setting, I think there will definitely be opportunities down the road in a professional setting. I was recently in New York, and I met a couple of Sydney High old boys, actually, and then they had like a network of other Australians that had moved straight from Sydney to New York in a professional setting. And so I think the opportunity will always be there.
Great, thanks, Shuming. Moving on, maybe might start with you here, Paul. Just if you were to go back to, say, your year 12 year, is there anything you might have done differently? Any tips? Any things that you sort of either were really happy about or you regretted?
Well, I certainly regret not studying quite hard enough as a typical Sydney High boy, thinking that I'd get through on the smell of an oily rag. Now, I did relatively well for someone that didn't do enough, and I'm sure there's a lot of young students in the audience that said I could do better. I wouldn't mind a few extra marks. At the end of the day, I'm a bit of a pragmatist, and I think that opportunities come your way if you're looking for them. I think the one thing I didn't learn at school, and I don't think they still do it today, is that I didn't learn a lot about marketing and David's area and one-on-one people skills and the ability to sell. And it was sort of a bit of a word, selling, marketing, were sort of foreign terms and a bit frowned on. When I was at school, everyone wanted to be a doctor or a dentist or something that was defined in what a career was. But the ability to sell and the ability to service people is, in the world that I live in, the most important skill I ever picked up. And I think I picked that up out of school than in school, if that answers your question, Darren.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Paul. Maybe you, David, going back to year 12, anything you sort of would have done differently? Or any tips?
Yeah, look, it's hard in this lockdown. I mean, it's one of the best years of my life. It was a great year, the sport, the high, the camaraderie of all our friends. We have a very close year. We're still friends to this day, a lot of us, and we hang out with them. So it was great. So I have No regret, and I know that's difficult in the current environment, and I'm very conscious that's occurring, and hopefully you've had a great experience and are having a great experience and continue to do at High. I think, yeah, I don't think then we had once again we didn't have a handy Google or anything like that. We didn't have the education of the world, and I think that there was probably a bigger opportunity out there that we didn't grab. Everybody automatically went to New South or Sydney. Nobody took on what Schumings took on, and I think I would have loved to have just even had that on my radar to say, wow, I could do university overseas. So yeah, and I encourage, and I think Schuming, it was spot on. If it doesn't come off in university, if you want to travel, it'll come off in your professional. So I was lucky to join Nestle, a Swiss company, and I was able to work in Switzerland and in the US with them. So early on in my 20s. So yeah, I think Sydney High is a great setup for that worldview, but we could have had more of it. So grab it if you're hearing about it and talking about it.
And yeah, I suppose assuming yourself, finally, any tips or anything you might have done slightly differently?
Yeah, definitely. I guess to David's point here, I think Year 12 was a great time and really enjoyed my time there. From everything that the school had to offer, the arts, the sports. But I think there's I guess everyone feels very much the same way, or at least in my year they did. I think we all really just are very concerned about an ATAR or like doing well in the HSC, and that's definitely important. But I think in my Year 12 experience, there was a lot of overstressing for that number. I remember there'd be countless hours just put into getting the highest grade possible, and maybe sacrificing some of the other aspects of school life that are important as well, like maybe not choosing to play just summer sport or winter sport, or I guess stopping participation in other activities. And I think that's something that I wish I didn't do, just because now I don't think after that day we got our results I've ever been asked what my ATAR was, but it's always those, I guess, the memories of what you did in high school with your mates that like you catch up on. And so I kind of really wish that just got the ATAR that got me into my degree, and just didn't really overstress about it.
Great, thanks, Schuming. Maybe just to give a little bit of information, your very first job when you left uni, the bit of your, how you handled it, whether you enjoyed it or you didn't enjoy it. Maybe Paul, if you could give us a bit of information there.
Believe it or not, when I left school, I because I had a lot of sport commitments and uni commitments, I started working at the Rose Bay RSL of all places. And I intended to stay there part-time for a few. Now, I never went for a few years. I never went full-time, but I stayed there 10 years on and off. And I met some of the nicest people and people I didn't know anything about. A lot of older people, which I think in the career in financial planning that I eventually pursued, it was a fantastic learning ground, because most of your clients as a financial planner are either over 50 or approaching retirement. And I don't think I could quantify exactly the skills I learned, except across the board, the people skills of learning to talk to people. And I had a boss to work with people, turn up on time. And I can remember he said to me, I was 17 years of age, so I wasn't even old enough to serve alcohol really, but he said, Paul, if there's three things you will keep you employed here forever, is that turn up on time, work when we want you to work, and don't take any money out of the till. And I've never forgotten those three things. So in a much broader sense, you follow those rules in business, even at the top end, you stay employed.
And what about your first, I suppose, first proper job, Paul? Not like your part-time, your first role, sort of, that was on the career path you've ended up.
It's funny about choices. I had the choice of becoming a cadet journalist with the ABC in their sports department or joining GIO. Now, GIO, I come from a modest background. The sports journalist sounded fantastic, and that sounded glamorous. But the GIO job offered a company vehicle and a bit more money. And someone whispered to me, said, "Paul, there's going to be really superstar sports people go into career journalism, and your sports career isn't that spectacular." So I took the job at GIO. The rest is history. You know, the deregulation of the financial markets, going back to uni and getting a bit more qualified in those finance fields that our other three speakers, including yourself, Darren, have done. You know, that was just choice. And if you make the right choice, you usually succeed.
Yeah, great. And say yourself, David, was your very first job out of uni the Nestle role?
Yeah, it was, Darren. So I've said that a couple of times. It was great, but I'll just tell you a little bit about it from the uni perspective and probably closer to where the boys are. So a lot of the big companies hire out of university. So Nestle had 3 graduate positions, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, and they sent me off to Brisbane, and they gave me a company car and a flat and put me out on the road to sell, and that's how you learn how to become a marketer. So it was a great experience. I suppose the recommendation that I will do is that when you're at university, don't just put your head down, have a look around, because there's plenty of opportunities there. A lot of the companies I know, the company I work for now, are always on the campuses looking for talented individuals. And those talented individuals, assuming put out about your number, doesn't necessarily about your number. It's about your ability to communicate, your ability to be a worldly person is some of the things that they think for. Because I was nowhere near the top of my class in the commerce class, but I picked up one of the big jobs. So I don't know. I still don't know how it actually happened, Darren. I don't know. Hopefully they got the right phone call. Anyway, they had me. They got me for the next 8 years.
You need some luck in life, don't you,
Yeah.
Scribbo? Yeah,
that's right.
And Shuming, your very first sort of job when you left uni, what your experience? Did you enjoy it or not? Yep.
Yeah. So my first job out of university was at JP Morgan, and really enjoyed my experience there. Had the opportunity to learn an incredible amount at a really fast pace. It taught me a lot about the basics of corporate finance and how to look at these different businesses across a variety of industries. And I think it gave me a lot of exposure to, I think, C-suite or management for a person who just graduated, and allowed me to be in the room listening to these conversations, not actively participating, but just listening and seeing what went on. And I thought that was something that was unique about the role, and hopefully will be very helpful as I look further into my career.
Great, thanks, Shuming. Moving on to, I suppose, how you've built or created your networks subsequent to leaving high school and probably university. What sort of things have you done to build those up? Maybe start with you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I think networks are hugely important. I've been through a few different changes in my career, and keeping them going is important. You do collect a lot of work colleagues along the way, and you collect people that you've sold to and people that you've had relationships with. I think we're enhanced these days with platforms like LinkedIn. It's not something you should spend every day on, but it's something that you should maintain and curate as a platform. and the boys will know a lot more about social media than I do, but it's important to keep that going as a professional platform for your network. The other thing is that you never know, those kind of networks are actually more important, I think, than probably anything else in getting roles. And I wouldn't, I'd be remiss of me not to mention the Sydney High network. It's a great network. You run across shops everywhere. And it's quite a healthy thing to have that shared experience. So remember that as well. And but I'd maintain your network, curate it through the platform that you want to curate it through.
And yourself, Paul, you've I know you've got quite an extensive network. How have you sort of built that up over the years?
Well, I think that if you're honesty is a massive thing in your own reputation of when you're talking to people. You've got to be interested in people, not just what you can get out of them from a work perspective. Or I tend to go away and mix with people that I like. That can be seen as a weakness sometimes, but I think that if you, having been lucky enough to go to Sydney High, to play some sport and to work and to come from work in the liquor trades or where people, all those skills put together help your network. And I think the two words that come to network, whether it's in a social sense or a business sense, are those two words: follow up. If you follow up, you will maintain your networks and be interested in what your clients want to be interested in. You know, I would never ring a client or a follow-up call and talk much about business. I think with Darren Howard, for example, you're there. I know what your interests are. I know your family. And I think that because eventually the thing that keeps most people together, the thread, is the business they're in. It will come out eventually, but following up, I reckon, is the real secret of keeping your networks going.
Great, thanks, Paul. And yourself, Shimmy, I suppose closer to the start of your career than ourselves and Paul and David, but how have you sort of kept those moving along since you've left uni?
Yeah, I would just add to both what David and Paul said. I think, always trying to follow up with people, or, especially now, I'm moving around and getting to travel domestically within the United States. I think taking some time to catch up with either old co-workers or old mentors in those different cities, and even if it's just for half an hour, just to get a coffee or something like that. I think that's always beneficial, and that's something that I've always tried to do. And then in terms of my career, I think someone said to me when I started at JP Morgan that it was always good to have someone who was a little older than you in your career at or in your job, but as a mentor, who's not who you're not a direct report to, but someone else in the firm that you can always go to them for advice and whatnot. And I've tried to do that at my old job and at my current job. Find someone who's kind of going to take you under their wing. If David was saying, there's the strength of the Sydney High network is the Sydney High network is very strong. I think when I've been here, I've been able to connect with a lot of reconnect with a lot of the old boys in America, whether it's a couple of years above. And there was one time where Paul actually had an old boys event in San Francisco, where we brought some of the old boys together in San Francisco, and so the network there is very strong. And I think every time I've tried to reach out to any of the Sydney High old boys, they've always been receptive and very willing and open to reconnecting.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. What about yourself, David? So any sort of experiences being a Sydney High old boy that have stood out for you in your career? Maybe some of the bit of a story about those.
Well, I think, well, there's a couple of different stories. I think I use the Old Boys Network quite extensively, especially from friends that have been there in '83. You're well known, Darren. I've got somebody looking after my super fund for me that happens to be an old boy. I've got a few other old boys that I've been in work with in the consulting capacity that have worked with me, and I think it's always been useful. And I think one thing that sets Sydney High's apart is we have a bit of a quirky sense of humour, so it's always good in the work environment to have somebody who has that sort of shared sense of humour, I think, which, yeah, it's been quite good.
Yeah, great. Thanks, thanks, David. And yourself, Paul. You're sort of. I'm sure you've crossed paths with a number of Sydney High old boys over the years. Any sort of any stories that stand out there?
Well, at the end of the day, you look after my super fund, Darren, and that's my future. So young boys, Darren's a superstar financials planner. In terms of my connections, I went to school with Michael Vaturis. He still looks after me in terms of his retail connections. My lawyer's an ex-Sydney High boy. So it's amazing when I was just hearing David talk then, how many connections you have from the years at Sydney High. And I also agree with David. I can't imagine how I would have been experiencing year 12 in the current COVID lockdown, because my whole life was about getting around and mixing with people and following them up and in a one-on-one sense. That's about all I can say, Darren. I keep in contact with everyone, as you know.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure, Paul. What about again, mate? Might start with you here, Shimming, and again, your career is sort of the early stages. But have you had any sort of setbacks yet you've had any issues that you've sort of had to overcome, or it's all been pretty smooth sailing so far?
Yeah, like you mentioned, my career's it's been it's early days. I've been out of school for, I guess, 3 years now, out of university for 3 years. So, definitely still early days, I think. I think I wouldn't say this is a setback. I just think, this was for sure a difficulty, but I think, this is fairly standard across the board in that, for my job at least, COVID was really, I guess, took like the whole financial services industry, at least here, took a turn for the worse in the sense that, we're in lockdown at home. It was a very different experience to being in the office. I think, there was different expectations and, you're a lot closer to your computer. And I think, every day starts looking the same in the sense that, you're locked down. So there's not much else that you can do. So I think, there's been, very, I guess, difficult time working at home in a COVID environment. But I think overall, not too many major setbacks so far in the 3 years of my career.
Right. What about yourself, Paul? Any sort of setbacks that stand out, and how you sort of overcome those? What you did to push through those?
Well, I think that when you get sacked from a sporting career, they don't give you a retrenchment package. You'll end up with nothing. But when I was there, my parents had died very early too. So we're talking. I think that everyone has setbacks. Now, every young man that's on this webinar call is going to have a setback. So I think the secret is you just got to reassess and keep going. Now, if you lose your job, which I have a couple of times, and what I would consider big jobs, you just got to reassess, use your networks, which we talked about before, people you'd followed up, and you'll be amazed how quickly you can get back on your feet if you're focused and you've got some ability. And there's no one on this call who went to Sydney High that hasn't got ability. So I think the message there, if you have a setback, just move forward and trust your abilities and you'll succeed.
And what about yourself, Dave? in
Yeah,
terms
I've
of-
had
yeah.
absolutely. Just following on from Paul, businesses have closed on me, retrenchments. It's all about getting back on your feet and getting absolutely using those foundations that you've done, reaching out to your network, quality, your quality individual, quality education through Sydney High, and then getting you onto university. They're great foundation stones. But things will happen. Life happens. I talked a little bit about the fact that I looked after the Virgin Mobile Australia business. Well, that doesn't exist anymore, so they closed that down. So you've got changes you got to deal with, and but it's using those foundations to catapult you to the next challenge.
Great, thanks, Dave. Yeah, you actually touched on it before, Dave. There's actually a great speech, boys. If you haven't had a chance to have a look at it, Steve Jobs addresses it. It's on YouTube. He addresses the graduating class in 2005 of Stanford. It's a fantastic speech to have a look at. But in that speech, it goes for about 15 minutes. But in that speech, he mentions you can't join the dots looking forward. It's only later on in your life and your career that you can look back and it all seems to make sense. Maybe might start with you here, Paul. When you look back on where you are now, did your career take any major diversions or areas or changes that you thought you wouldn't have foresaw early, but now it looks back and it all seems to make sense to you?
Well, I think it's probably, when I look back, it's a jigsaw puzzle. And I think the thing that links every piece of the jigsaw puzzle has been, and I have to say this modestly, is my people skills, because, I've gone from sport to being in an insurance world to being a banker to being at the top end of town as a stockbroking person, trying to understand the world you're in at one stage, superannuation, and now I'm in a relationship job with the biggest insurance brokerage in the world. Now, they're not linked except that you deal with people. And I think the people equation is the thing that links all your past. And you're right, when you look back, you think, how did I go from being unemployed to doing that, and it was always knowing someone talking to someone and projecting that I think I want to do the job and I want to do it well.
Great. And Chiming, I suppose yours, I don't want to leave you out, but you probably haven't had too many dots to join yet, but where you sit now, was this sort of exactly where you sort of, if you're in year 12, the job you're doing now is what you thought you'd be doing?
Absolutely not. I think this was, going into a role like this was definitely something that I didn't really plan out too much. When I was at UCLA, actually, I was applying for internships, and I happened to get one at JP Morgan, and ended up getting a full-time offer, and decided to stay. But had that not been the case, I would have come back home or look for a different job. Initially, I was looking at a little more, I guess, economics research heavy jobs. So think the Reserve Bank, and roles similar to that, where you're doing a lot more data analysis, and then I guess less accounting. But I think, to Paul's point, it's all about trying to be the best athlete, if you will. Be the person that people want to work with, be the most adaptable when the time comes, and adaptable in these situations that arise. And I think there's definitely been we all have a shared experience of going to Sydney High, and I think that definitely prepares you well for that, and for any difficulties that may arise in the job. But yeah, overall, did not have a plan to stay here for that long even, and hopefully mum and dad aren't on the line, but yeah, don't think I'm going back anytime soon either. So
Great. And what about yourself, David? Where you're looking back now, where you are now,
Looking back, I was a little bit disappointed Steve Jobs stole my quote. So that was the first thing that went wrong. But no, absolutely. You don't know. I came out of university and went through for a few graduate jobs and ended up at one that turned out to be all right, but it could have not been. You know, you have to adapt. And it's so true. But you probably also, I think, as Paul said, you know, he's a people person. What's the thing that sets you apart? You know, we do talk about in the area that I'm in now about what your superpower is. And, you know, Paul's definitely a people person. Mine's about customer experience. And it doesn't matter whether it's a bank, a telco, or, you know, Woolworths. It's about ensuring that they're having great customer experiences and helping with them. And that's the sort of career progression I did out of marketing where, you know, even going back, you do a couple of subjects in marketing and in commerce at New South called customer behavior, and that sort of got me around. You know, that's what I think is the thing to business growth. So that's why I'm into it.
Great, thanks. And in terms of your current roles, what would you say, maybe assuming your favourite part about your current role is what really, when you wake up in the morning, what do you look forward to most about your current role?
Yeah, definitely. So I think my current role right now is basically investing into various companies, and mainly through the form of debt, but also at times equity securities as well. But what I enjoy the most about this role is that you work across a variety of industries. So you're looking at, you know, one day you're looking at technology companies, software companies in particular, and then another day you'll get to look at, you know, a consumer retail company, or you'll look at, you know, industrials like manufacturer, and really seeing from, you know, the work that you do into these companies and the dives that you do into these companies, you get to see, I guess, how the broader economy works. And, you know, you're seeing all these different businesses, and, you know, you understand where they sit in the supply chain and whatnot, and the value chain, and how these different industries work. For me on the West Coast, a lot of it has been, you know, software companies, and how you know, software is so pervasive in our lives right now, and technology, but you know, how these different software companies work and the end markets that they serve. And so, yeah, really getting the opportunity to kind of dive into a whole variety of industries and keep learning is something that I really enjoy about my current role.
Great, thanks, Shiming. What about yourself, Paul? What's the favourite part of your role now?
Well, it's certainly not the technicalities of insurance, I can tell you that, because I don't know that much about it. I think that what I get off on is that most of my clients, and I've got limit, you find that rather than trying to drink the ocean, I only have about 20 clients that I think are the ones that need most of my attention. And if I can help solve their problems, whether that be to navigate their way through Suncorp, whether for them to find solutions, if you do that, I get satisfied and I get rewarded for it. So one thing I was going to add that you mentioned earlier about planning. When you're 64 years of age, I can remember when I was 25, and it's a bit off topic of what you asked, but it's important. We used to sit down and do 5, 10 and 20-year plans at the GIO. 3 years after we did that, it didn't exist. So I would, in terms of planning, you've got to be flexible, and going to work means change, and you've got to be able to adapt to change and keep moving.
And yourself, Dave, I think your current role is reasonably new, but even this one or your previous role, what was the main things that you sort of enjoyed most about it?
Yeah, I think for me it was achievement and making a difference, hitting goals, doing success. But I think doing it with a team, very team orientated sort of person. So I suppose it comes from Sydney High and all those cricket games and football games and basketball, etc., and playing on the flat and stuff with your mates. It's about team, and you get a lot out of that because you enjoy success together. And yeah, I like that, and not being a lone wolf. That's why I never did tennis.
And I suppose with your roles in recent years, has the workload been like hectic? And if so, how have you sort of balanced your family and social activities, and fitness and that type of thing? How do you fit those areas in? Maybe start with yourself, Shuming.
Yeah, definitely. I, like we've previously mentioned, I'm kind of still early in my career, so no family yet. So
Is it long hours you're currently working? Should be like what sort of hours are you working?
Yeah, so definitely long hours. I think it ranges, but I would say think of like around 60 to 80 hours a week. And there's definitely a juggling act in terms of prioritizing, social activity versus, spending time at work, or, having some downtime to yourself, or carving out time for fitness. But I think for me, the way that I try and allocate time to that, and I think this, especially fitness, is something that I like do in the mornings. I'm a very big morning person on that, and I think that is definitely stuck with me through my high school days, and that's when I first got into it. All these morning trainings, and I think that's what really conditioned me into being a morning person in that sense. So every day we'll start off with some sort of activity, whether it be going to the gym or going for a run or something like that. But then to the weekends, I think it's setting some time away from work, and just for my friends or for myself in that week, that I'm managing around schedules, work schedules, and I think now companies understand, and especially in the COVID environment, it's been hard to detach. So people are are more respectful for your own time and your downtime, and so I think it's been a little easier recently. But I think definitely prioritizing that over work is something that I've learned to get better at as I continue moving through my career.
Great, thanks for that. And yourself, David, how have you sort of managed your work-life balance and family, fitness, social activities?
Yeah, look, I think it's something you've got to be really conscious of. I worked and do work in an industry that is very focused on the social aspects of it as well. So especially with clients, etc. So you've got to be careful there. Once you have a family, you have to work out at making time, because that's important. That's the most important part of your life. It's is actually family, and being there at those special moments throughout, and making sure you're there for them and you can help them. But have I always been good at it? Absolutely not. It's something that you have to work at, and there's some big hours come with full-time work in big organizations. But as a manager said to me early on, you could work here 10 days a week and you still wouldn't achieve everything. So sometimes you just have to close it off and make the call that your family's more important.
And yourself there, Paul, how have you sort of managed those?
I take a lead from Shuming. I wouldn't probably have a meeting before 8 o'clock any day, Monday to Friday, and I do some physical exercise. I try and go from 5:30 to about 7 of them, and do something, whether it's a walk or whether I hit some golf balls or whether I go for a swim in the summer down the beach. I try, and 7 days a week I try and do something. I think in terms of work in your family, I didn't have my children, my 2 boys, until I was in my 40s. And I agree with David so much. The only thing you can give your children is time. So I made time to go to kids' sport perhaps because I liked it. And I think in terms of your work, one great man told me once that at the end of the day, it's only a game. And if you remember that, then you've got to win. You know, as a sportsman, you've got to win. As a business person, you've got to win. But it is a game. And you do get to fight back from a loss. So time for your kids, a bit of exercise. And on game day in your job, you've got to give 100%. And game days are either a presentation or I think the other thing that I liked about organising my time in terms of a corporate life is whatever mildly interests my boss fascinated me. So that's something to take with you.
Great. And I'm just sort of got a couple of questions here. I'm just bundling them up. But in terms of the companies that you've worked for, and again, assuming you might not, you've got probably less to choose from here, but larger companies as opposed to smaller companies, what's your experience been there? And I suppose how would you, if you've got any tips about how you might try and toss up between those sort of competing companies, larger, smaller, or any tips along those lines for career progression? I might start with you there, Dave.
Yeah, look, that's a great question. That's a really great question. I don't think there's a right answer for that. I absolutely don't. I mean, because you can swing now from big companies to small companies and small companies to big companies. I've seen big companies and I've hired people from small companies while I've been in a big company because they come with a greater entrepreneurial spirit. They usually get their hands dirty. They can multitask. But then big companies teach you a lot about politics. They teach you a lot about how to work and influence across others. So the small or big company comes with anything. Yeah, it's good to have some brands on your resume. So remember that. But you know, it's all not Goldman Sachs and all that. Sometimes some of these small companies, and I think what I like and what I've heard is in the last 10 years, some of the really talented individuals, and I'm sure there's a few on the phone, are going to startups in San Francisco and things like Schuming are doing, rather than just automatically going to your McKinsey's or your Goldman Sachs, you know, either take an investment banking route or a consulting route. So I think there's a lot of flexibility now that you should have a really good long look at what appeals for you. Is it getting that multitasking, or do you want to be part of a bigger group and a bigger way to go forward?
And Schuming, have you sort of, when you've chosen some of your roles, have you had the choice between sort of bigger or smaller firm, and have you made a call there for any particular reason?
Yeah, definitely. So when I moved out of my previous role, I actually had the option to move to a much smaller firm that was, you know, focused. It was an international firm focused on building out its US presence. And I ended up deciding not to go with that firm, just based on the fact, primarily based on the fact that, you know, basically deciding where I would have the ability to learn the most. I think, you know, because I'm still, you know, 3 years out in my career, I think it's a lot easier to go from a larger firm to a smaller firm. And I wanted to make sure that, you know, I would still have the opportunity and have the kind of, I guess, steep learning curve that I did in my previous job, and continuing that. And so I think that's, I would say, the main reason I chose to kind of stick with a larger firm.
And what about yourself, Paul, in terms of your career? Any preference for smaller companies, larger companies?
Well, I'm primarily work with larger companies. They're fantastic, assuming they don't. I've always worked with fantastic places, the Commonwealth Bank, St George, GIO, and now Suncorp. But big places are great training grounds in lots of areas. David said political learnings is very, very important. They give you opportunities to do training. They pay for a lot of things for you to go. And like for me, St. George paid for my MBA, and there's lots of things like that. They want to help you succeed. And I would say if you're with a big company, I haven't had a bad experience with a big company. Maybe there's some political hiccups, but that helps you learn as well. And I'd be less than honest because I haven't really worked with a small operation myself. And Darren, you've gone from a big operation to a small operation, and you're probably better at describing how that is than I am.
Yeah. So I suppose I probably would have made the decision. We've got our own business now, but I probably would have made the decision to go down that path a lot earlier. But again, going back to the joining the dots, it just that they didn't line up earlier. But have been doing that for the last 5 years, and it's worked particularly well. So yeah, very, very happy with that. Very happy with that call. We're sort of coming towards the end. I'm just trying to probably cover off on these last few questions. Just very quickly going back to your experience between the US and Australian universities in that the different syllabuses in terms of business syllabus. Was there a massive difference that you picked up, Shuming, between, say, Australian unis and US universities, or you prefer one over the other for any particular reason?
No, in terms of the business curriculum, I think it's fairly similar. So at my school, we didn't actually have a business school, an undergraduate business school. So we only had a graduate business school, which is not very similar to what they have here. I know at UNSW and UC, they both have undergraduate business schools. So a lot of us who wanted to do business at UCLA ended up just opting to do economics with a bit of accounting. So there was, in that sense, it was different. But I think in terms of the curriculum overall, it's fairly similar across business schools. That is, so my degree was an economics degree. So I think, in terms of that, it is fairly similar. But I would say that the US has like a different high school standard in terms of your core high school subjects, so like English, math, science, and when I moved to the US, I think a lot of first year, like a lot of your college experience in first year is having the ability to take all these, I would classify them as like general education classes. So being able to take a science class, a history class, a mathematics class, an English class that satisfy requirements to graduate. Where I think it's like a little different here in Australia, where you may not have the ability to take a lot of classes for interest, and it's a much more streamlined process. Once you've kind of declared your major or know what you're going to study, you're kind of thrown into what, if it's finance, a whole bunch of finance courses, and then less so of the kind of I would say more of it like a year 12 experience where you're taking courses across different subjects. So I would say those are the main differences. And then I think in terms of the college experience, I think it's vastly different from what it is like in Australia. I think the biggest part was how everyone lived on campus, or most of us lived on campus. So I think, in that sense, you have like an immediate community to go back to after class. And it was, I guess similar to boarding school in that way, where everyone like lived together. But, I think everyone was going through college or like, leaving home at the same time, which was really helpful. And I think like the aspects of college life were just very different in the sense of sports played a much bigger part in shaping my college experience, whether it's like basketball or American football. I think, there's a lot more of a kind of a school competitiveness or school pride kind of dynamic when your school's playing other schools and whatnot. And I also had the opportunity to play rugby at UCLA as well, and so that dynamic of the sports and heavily intertwined with college life, whether you're playing or you're supporting, I think is went a long way into shaping my college experience. And I think that is what I would say would be one of the differentiators of my time at UNSW versus UCLA.
Great, thanks for that. And just probably one for, or potentially for all of you, but for maybe start with Paul. What is the main quality or main thing you've looked for when you've been employing and hiring people through your sort of working careers? Is there any sort of particular quality or characteristic that you've found most attractive to hire people?
Enthusiasm and honesty. It's that simple. If you get someone who's enthusiastic and wants to do the job and does it in an honest and professional manner, they're just two fantastic qualities: enthusiasm and honesty.
And what about yourself, Dave?
Yeah, I agree with Paul, and we're probably just going to build on it. We go around, but I think just a few human traits is really healthy. So and that enthusiasm, honesty, absolutely, and just being human, understanding, being empathetic and authentic is really important.
And Shuming, have you been in a position you've been hiring people as yet, or? And if
I
so,
wouldn't say make. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, if you have, what sort of have you sort of been looking for, what qualities?
Yeah, I think I have been in a position where you're making hiring decisions or being a part of a team setting. I think what I've liked to look for, at least I think at a junior level, is like social, like the social aspect of like, can you get along with them? Like, are you able to work a decent amount of hours with them, and are they going to be able to kind of do the work and have a good attitude on top of the human aspect and the honesty aspect to them, making sure that they're likable and get along with the rest of the team.
Great. Well, look, hopefully I've covered all of the questions that you've asked here. I'll just, if there's if there's any final tips at all for the boys just before they do their HSC, Shuming, David, Paul, if there's anything that it might help just in the final couple of months.
I just say do your best, but believe me, your HSC mark is probably one of the least important things you do long term. Or as David said earlier, no one's ever asked me for my HSC mark.
Shuming, David, anything else?
Just good luck to the boys, setting out and doing it, and fantastic. Got the big world in front of you. Lots of opportunity. High should set you up pretty well for that. Just go and grab it.
Yeah, I would say adding on to that, best of luck for everyone in their HSC and their postgraduate careers. I would say if you're ever on the fence about like reaching out to one of the old boys, whether it is, for mentorship, guidance, or just to catch up, I would definitely say, don't ever hesitate to reach out. I think last week, the 2009 Sydney High School captain, Pat Desmond, is moving to Los Angeles. And, I ended up reaching out to him and, we're going to catch up, and he's moving here full time. And so I think, if you ever feel that you just want to reach out for whatever reason there is, don't hesitate. I think from my experience, at least, they've always been welcoming and, are willing to catch up and provide that mentorship or guidance.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well, look, I'll wrap that up there. Look, my best wishes as well to all the boys about to do their HSC. You show that HSC exam who's boss. I'm sure for the rest of us, if I can help in any way over coming years, I'm on the old boys committee, and I'm sure you can get my contact details from this or from Paul or from the old boys at any time. So yeah, definitely feel free to get in touch if I can help in any way. And I'll pass it over to Paul to close it up.
Thanks, Darren, and to everyone, Dave, Paul, Shuming, thanks for making the time available, especially you, Shuming, over there at what's now past 1 a.m. in the morning. So I'm sure the boys and their parents are really grateful. We had a record attendance today of any of our events, well over 120 people on the session, not including where there's multiple. So there's probably, upwards of 300 people listening in, which is brilliant. With an 89%, I found the session value rating on the poll. So thanks to everyone for that. We have our follow-on session. We had our law session last week. We're business today. We have a career in technology on Thursday, and then we wrap it up. Let the boys get the year 12 boys get their trials done and HSC. So thanks everyone for attending, and look forward to seeing everyone in the future, hopefully at the school, but who knows what's happening, and good luck in the exams. Thanks everyone.
That's cool. Thanks, Shuming.
Thank you.
Dave,
Thank you.
boys.
Go get them, boys.
Yeah.